Welcome. I'm Chris Richards, the eclectic radical, and welcome to Uncivil Disobedience. I'm glad to see you all tonight. Tonight, our guest is Shareef Snuggs from the March for Medicare for All. Tell us what you're here to talk about tonight, Shareef.
Yeah, so the March for Medicare for All, we have a new action. It's called Occupy Pfizer. It's Monday, November 15th from 8:30 to 10:30. So we're there to give our demands to Pfizer. We're also drafting letters that we're also going to send out to Pfizer as well. Those letters will be going out. They'll be rolling out from this week and going into next week. So we will letting them know why we're occupying them, why we're processing them, and it's very simple. We want Pfizer to have the same energy when it comes to COVID. We want them to have the same energy when it comes to cancer, when it comes to any other preventative medicine. It's quite simple. Why should COVID be the only disease, so to speak, that Pfizer is taking seriously? Why not breast cancer? Why not any other disease? And so this is why we're occupying them.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
What the? Why? Excuse me.
Oh, take your time.
No, this is frustrating. That's better. For some reason, it didn't want to load my profile, and I need to get to my profile to be able to promote the Twitter version of the stream.
Okay.
Now I made it. Come on. There we go. Okay, there it is, and there it is. Oh, come on. There it is. All right, that's done. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
No, Pfizer definitely should be caring about more than just COVID. And honestly, they'd get better paid for a whole lot of stuff and have an easier time collecting if Medicare for All were passed.
Right. And also too, like, and we're not an unreasonable coalition. We with our demands, with our asks, what we're asking Pfizer is simple. To endorse. Pretty much, we have a UN petition that we have right now. We're actually currently working on filing a grievance, a complaint to the UN about the United States government, and we're asking Pfizer to endorse that. So basically, we want to go to the UN and tell the UN, listen, many Americans do not have access to healthcare, can't get healthcare, and we're a lot of us are dying, they're suffering, and so we need you to address this issue. And we're asking Pfizer to step in and say we endorse that concept, we endorse that idea to make the United States government hold themselves accountable by providing many Americans with healthcare. And if Pfizer doesn't want to do that, please go on record and say that you don't believe healthcare is a human right. You do believe many Americans deserve to die, and that you feel that it's their responsibility for why they don't have healthcare and why their loved ones are going to die. Publicly say that. And if they don't do neither, right, they don't endorse our petition, or they don't adhere to us and say, we don't think healthcare is human right, we're going to keep attacking them. We're going to keep protesting them, because you need to pick a side, right? Where do your allegiance lie? Your allegiance lie with profits, which is proved that they do. Or do you agree?
And let's be frank, the least they could do is do something like support Medicare for All, because U.S. government paid them a whole lot of money for vaccine doses. And that's great. We need to have vaccines out there. We need to be able to protect people. Wonderful. But
Right.
I mean, you've got a company like Pfizer that makes all sorts of drugs.
Right.
They make a whole lot of money off those drugs. You notice that after promising us, well, no, we're not going to pass Medicare for all, but we are going to lower prescription drug prices. You notice they failed to lower prescription drug prices because three Democrats refused to play ball.
Right.
And you notice how it's always moderates who refuse to play ball. The progressives have been going along with everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the moderates, after getting everything they want, say, no, we're not going to support it.
Right. And that's another thing too. I want to draw the parallel because I mentioned to a few. I believe I was talking to Jordan Sheridan when I was on Status Quo. I was mentioning to him that we need to start attacking the pharmaceutical companies. We need to go out to them. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this Pfizer action, because that's something that's been on our mind. Is that don't talk to the horse's ass, talk to the horse's head. We know that the politicians are being paid by the pharmaceutical companies, just corporations in general, to block any bill. I don't care, pick a bill, whatever you don't like, right? They're blocking that. So we need to go after these people who are responsible for that. So
it's true, we do, and we need to. If we could make them go on the record, that would be perfect.
Right.
If they would support Medicare for all, that would be the next best thing.
Right. And here's the thing too, I was going to mention, reason why we want them to go on record. So with the UN, and maybe people don't know, is that we have to showcase that we exonerated all domestic remedies, right?
Yeah.
So when we do all this filing, they're going to ask that question. And so when we go to them, we says, well, listen, Pfizer, they don't believe healthcare is human right. This is why we need to collect this data. We need to collect this information. So when we attack politicians, and when we attack these pharmaceutical companies, they're not for no reason. We're going after them because we need to let entities like the UN know that these politicians and these corporations, they do not work for us. This is why we don't have it. Look at all the developed countries that do have it. Like the domestic remedies have been exonerated already.
And it's not just the places that Bernie Sanders was talking about in the election either. It's not just Sweden and Norway. Samoa has universal health care. Uruguay has universal health care.
Yes.
These are not first world countries.
Brazil even too.
Well, Brazil is different. Brazil is this close to being a first world country, and would be if the United States didn't keep sending the CIA down there. I say this all the time. I've said this on other shows. Did you know that about the time the Civil War happened, Brazil and the United States were considered about equal power and importance by Europe?
Wow.
And if things had gone on the way people thought they were going to at the time the Civil War happened, there was a possibility that Brazil would have surpassed the United States. It had that potential. So when you hear Bill Gates talk about overpopulation, it's not just India and South Africa. He's worried about Brazil too, because Brazil used to be a rival of the United States and has potential to be a rival of the United States again. And if you're stuck in competitive capitalism, well, you can't have any rivals.
Right. Yeah, I was mentioning the fact how Brazil also has a single payer system, and it's shocking to me that a place like Brazil has it, and many Americans do not know that, and we sit here and think that we still can afford it, which is crazy to me. We still have that weird talking point. It's not about costability anymore. It's just about the fact that they don't want you to have it. As simple as that. You don't want the working class to be empowered. You don't want the working class to be emboldened. I always say that healthcare is like having wealth. If you have your health, you have your wealth. 100%.
Well, we certainly know that in capitalism, if you don't have your health, the hospital takes your wealth.
Right.
Whatever you have.
Right.
Unless you're rich enough that they never ask you to pay for anything, which is the worst secret of all. And most people still don't realize it. the rich get most of the shit they get for free.
Yep.
Or very nearly so, because half of the money they spend is borrowed from a bank against their net worth and never paid back. Endless lines of credit. Wouldn't you love an endless line of credit?
Who wouldn't?
And we talk about the United States having an endless line of credit, which it could if it really wanted to. But billionaires and really rich millionaires literally get an endless line of credit from their bank because the bank knows they're rich, and the bank would rather like to be able to point to the billionaire who's their customer than actually make money off the billionaire.
Right.
It's just sad.
Yeah.
But we have to pay for everything.
It's a big club, and we in it.
Exactly. It's not that big a club though anymore. The club has been shrinking. For a while it was growing, but now it's definitely shrinking again. I mean, people are getting richer.
Right, for sure. For sure.
They're not letting as many of the middle class become millionaires, and they're not letting as many of us become the middle class anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely either you're really poor or you're really rich. It's definitely coming to that point for sure.
And even the middle class are so in debt they might as well be poor sometimes.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, and which is not to say that they're just going to naturally take our side. They have to be convinced, but. But all the same, it's the middle class are in so much debt that they might as well be poor. They don't own their stuff anymore. The bank owns their stuff. It used to be you bought your home, you paid it off after so much time, and it was yours, 10, 20-year mortgage, whatever. Now they do 30 and 40-year mortgages. And you pay off it used to be you paid on your car for a year or two, and now you're paying on your car sometimes for longer than you have your car. You're rolling over the loan into the loan for the new car, and you're still paying off your old car with your new car.
Why do you think many of Americans just lie down and take it? I'm very concerned about this. I'm just finding it very fascinating that we all know that we're in times, and we have so many social issues. It was not just healthcare, it's criminal justice, it's housing, food. There's so many different things that we face here. Why is it that we as Americans just take it? Why are we not more angry? Why are we not more angry?
There are 3 levels. The first is we've been brainwashed into believing we live in the best country in the world.
Sure.
A lot of people still have a very hard time believing that people have free speech in Europe.
Right.
It's illegal to criticize the Queen in the UK. Have you ever read the British tabloids? I mean, but yeah, no, that America is the only place with free speech, or that people spend so much more time in jail in other countries than the U.S., or they kill people for reasons we would never kill anyone here.
Wow, that's not even true.
It's not true anymore. I mean, the only place that it's true, that it's sort of true, is China, which does have a very long list of capital offenses. And that list does include some things that most Americans would not consider a capital offense. They execute you for driving drunk. They execute you for running red lights. There are several other traffic offenses that they execute you for in China, but it's because they see someone who's chronically running red lights or chronically driving drunk as a threat to everyone else on the road.
Right.
And if someone won't stop, then capital punishment. That's how they think it's that serious.
Right.
I'm not saying they're right, but even with that policy, even with all those capital offenses, they still execute fewer people than the U.S., and they have a much bigger population.
Interesting. Wow.
We still have a higher percentage of our population in prison than China does. And China is supposed to be the evil communist dictatorship.
Right.
But we have a bigger percentage of our population in prison.
Right.
The only places that have a bigger percentage of their population in prison are like these little tiny tin pot dictatorships with 5 citizens and 3 of them are in prison. I exaggerate a little bit, but we're in that league.
We are
in that league. And the only place in the world where there are more guns than the U.S. is Yemen, and Yemen's fighting a civil war with the Saudis intervening in it.
Do you think we'll get Medicare for all in our lifetime?
I don't know.
I'm optimistic about it. I'm very optimistic about it.
I have mixed ideas. I'm glad Johnny's here because Johnny was in a chat room when I said this.
Mm-hmm.
If you had asked me in 2019, I was going to say things have changed since 2016. Mm-hmm. Bernie's got people on the DNC now. Bernie's made more or gotten more relationships built since then. People are going to come around and they're going to support Bernie instead of Biden because just look at Biden.
Mm-hmm.
And I was totally wrong. But I was sure Bernie was going to win. I thought it was almost impossible for him to lose. And
Bernie, I just think Bernie is. I said this earlier on Twitter. I think
I'm not saying I think Bernie's everything that he's cracked up to be. I'm just saying,
not at all. Not at all. Not at all. No, I felt your sentiment honestly in 2016 about Bernie. I felt Bernie couldn't lose, but then when he lost and lied down and took it, like a cuck, I was like, "There's no way this guy could win again. This guy could have a chance."
See, but the thing about that was, and if it had been anybody but Bernie, lying down like that would have guaranteed him the win in 2020. The only reason that it didn't was because it was Bernie. And I had not thought it through that far. I thought the Democratic Party would actually would actually treat Bernie the way it had treated other Democrats in the past when things like that were done. But no.
Right.
I did not have the full sense of how far the Democrats would go to stop even the smallest change for the better.
What also too gave me some glimmer of hope is when Bernie was we thought Bernie was the last man standing, and then when everyone else dropped out and gave Joe Biden that bump, I was like, man, that hurt. I was like, wow, this is over now. Now it's over. Joe Biden won.
And that was the whole thing. When Bernie won Nevada,
I was like, it's over. I was like, it's over. I was happy
at that point. And he would have run away with it at that point if nothing else had changed.
Right.
But everybody suddenly dropped out and endorsed Biden. Obama was suddenly 100% behind Biden. Right. The only person who stayed in was Elizabeth Warren, and that was clearly to try to grab whatever progressive votes she possibly could away from Bernie.
Right.
I don't even count Tulsi. She was a joke.
You don't think Tulsi was running legitimately?
I think Tulsi was running to get to exactly where Tulsi is now, which is every Republican's favorite ex-Democrat and a well-paid guest on Fox News whenever she wants.
Mm-hmm.
That was what she was running for.
Right.
It's just like Pete Buttigieg was running for a spot in the cabinet.
Right.
And Kamala Harris was running to be vice president. Which is sad. She didn't get a single delegate, and they still made her vice president.
Both of them. Both her and Joe. No, they didn't got anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you can be a loser and still be a winner in this country. It's fascinating.
Oh, yes. That's a very good point about China. Can you imagine the difference? I'm not in favor of capital punishment again, but can you imagine the
Wow.
difference that would have made?
If we did that here, that would be very surprising to me.
Of course it would. It would never happen.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, that's not real. I was like, that must be.
I mean, you can make all the jokes you want about Switzerland, but when the Venezuelan bankers fled Venezuela, they didn't go to Switzerland. They came to Florida.
Right. Right. That's wild. Wild.
Yeah, no. But it's not even just Medicare for all either. You remember, I don't know if you remember or not. I don't know how old you are. Back in 2000, what?
I'm 38.
Oh, okay. So you're older than I thought. Okay. Mm-hmm. But back in, so you probably do remember, back in 2008, you remember they gave away all the best parts of Obamacare to Ben Nelson, dropped the public option, dropped the original payment matching scheme, all that, dropped all the good stuff from Obamacare and just kept the mandate and the Medicaid expansion.
Which they're doing now.
And Ben Nelson was just the Joe Manchin of his day, really.
Right. They're doing that right now. They're doing something right now.
Exactly that right now with the American Rescue, the Build Back Better Act.
Right. Do you think why do you think so many of us on the left or left leaning or left thinking, we kind of look for this information and the other Americans who don't know? What do you think caused that to happen?
This is where I get all philosophical and start talking about ancient Greeks and it gets less fun. But
well, no, it isn't less fun because I bring it up because I mentioned this because for the obvious fact is that we're all trying to make a better country in some amalgamation, right?
Yeah.
Why is it the other members of society are content with the way things are?
Number one is where I was before, where they all think it's already the best country in the world, and they just don't really understand what other countries have. Right. Number two, there are a lot of people who understand what we don't have and blame the wrong people. And that's because America has a huge problem with false class consciousness, where middle class people are sure they're going to be rich, and working class people think of themselves as middle class.
Right.
And then you've got this slice of the middle class, this sort of lower middle class, middle class, people who own their own businesses and still do a little bit of their own work, but also have money in the bank and own stuff and maybe don't owe the debt on their house that everybody else does. And you don't have a lot, but what Marx called the petty bourgeois, the little shopkeepers and things like that. Everybody who owns their own business or works for themselves, the plumbers and electricians and et cetera. All those guys think they're working class, and they're really bosses, but they think of themselves as the working class. And both the Democrats and the Republicans kind of think of them as the working class too, and miss the real working class completely. Whereas these same people who are really sometimes very upper middle class, who think of themselves as working class, don't think of billionaires as the elite who are holding them down. If they did, they wouldn't hate the Democrats so much. No, the elite that they think is holding them down are these doctors and lawyers and CEO types who are only a little bit higher on the higher on the education chain than them, but not necessarily actually higher on the wealth chain sometimes. Because some of these guys who own their own business are richer than some of the doctors and lawyers. And, some of the doctors and lawyers are rich. But they see these doctors and lawyers as the elite holding them down and aren't even thinking about the billionaires. They think of the billionaires as like them, just with more money. And that's not how it works.
Right.
The billionaires do not think of these small business owners as like billionaires, but with less money.
Right.
But that's where all the problems come from, is all that stuff. And the real working class and the underclass all get left out.
Right.
The people in prison, the people who aren't working, the people who don't have homes, the people who are living paycheck to paycheck, the people whose money all goes to rent on the first check of the month and can't buy groceries until the second check of the month.
Right.
Those people don't get paid any attention by this government.
Right.
And even Bernie was talking more to the middle class than the real working class, which isn't to say that if we had to have someone who was running, that Bernie wasn't the best choice, but he wasn't all that either.
Yeah. Well, to be with that being said, I still don't believe in electoral solutions for that reason.
I don't either.
Yeah, for that reason. Yeah.
I mean, and that this last election is really what, more than anything else, changed my mind.
Right.
I still support some people who are running for office, but that's because I support them as people who are willing to fight and say things that need to be said, not because I necessarily think that they'll be able to do a lot if they're elected.
Right.
You think that they're people I trust not to sell out.
Right.
But and they can maybe be the people who will actually keep trying and keep speaking up and be what we wanted some of the other progressives to be. But that doesn't mean they'll accomplish anything without us still doing marches and strikes and being ready to do a general strike if we ever actually get the organization and the chance.
Yeah, that's the next move. I think that not just for the March for Medicare for All, but I think for the working class in this country is a general strike. We need to do that. We're not going to get, in my opinion, we're not going to get a Medicare for All without the numbers. We're going to need like a lot of people behind us. Even with the other actions going on in this country, the different strikes that's going on in this country, those folks, those workers who are striking, they're not going to get what they want until they have the numbers as well.
And let's even in cases where they've been doing really well as far as the strike goes, they've still had to deal with being undercut sometimes by the union negotiators.
Right.
At the big Volvo strike, when Volvo offered the same contract they had offered the last time that the workers refused, the union basically shoved it down their throat in another vote and then ordered everybody back to work.
Wow.
And I'm glad that the John Deere people are on strike, but the union almost tried to stop a strike from happening there.
Mm-hmm.
The Hollywood crew union did in the end up making a deal not to strike that was less than the workers wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So there are structural weaknesses in the organized labor movement, and there's a lot of starting over that has to be done.
Right.
And the problem is that nobody's looking. There are a lot of people who just sort of assumed, and at one point I was one of them maybe, but there are a lot of people who just sort of assumed that all the people who had been allies in 2020 were going to still be allies going forward. And that's not what happened.
Right.
And things broke along a bunch of fault lines because that was a presidential campaign and not a movement. And there was this assumption that we did have a movement that really wasn't true.
Right. Right.
And what do you think about that? You've been asking me questions, but what do you think about that?
Well, I would agree that leadership kills movements, because look what happened when Bernie dropped out the Medicare for All movement kind of went, got stagnant. And I just personally feel that we need to embolden the working class and embolden us, the average American in our own community, that you can be proactive in your community. You can make a change. You can make a difference. And we need to kind of like embolden more people to take more direct action. So don't just look, for, our revolution or DSA or the People's Party or the Green Party or March Medicare for All or any different group. You can start your own group. You can start your own thing or not have a group and just go out there and speak truth to power. I think that's something that needs to be more promoted, in my opinion.
If you've got the time and energy, you can work with or help, a couple of those groups.
Right.
In Illinois, there's a statewide group that includes Party of Socialism and Liberation people and Greens and Democrats and DSA people and even some folks who just usually don't vote at all. And they've been trying to pressure the governor to stop utility shutoffs and evictions.
Right.
They've had a lot of success at the local level getting city governments to sign on with them, though the billionaire who's governor of Illinois is still a jackass who won't help anyone.
Yeah, so it's super important. We need that energy. We need people we need to do more town halls. We just finished doing a Day to Dead action in San Francisco. I just came back from San Francisco. I live here in New York City, and I went out there just for this particular action, and I got to meet Shareef Snuggs for the first time. And I was telling him that town halls, I think is something that we need to start doing more often. We need to kind of like meet locally in our community. I live here in Astoria and in Queens, and one of the things I want to start doing is talking to the community about our healthcare. Why it's important to me, why we need to be involved, why we need to get engaged. And I think these kind of town halls, door knocking, go to people's homes and give them some information, I think will be crucial for the fight for Medicare for All. I think we need to marches and rallies and things like that and protests are really important. But I do think the one-on-one kind of personal connection with people is going to be vital to grow more people into the movement.
No, I agree with all of that. Though I do have to ask a question because I know a lot of New York socialists, and it's something like 3/4 of them are from Queens. Is Queens the center of the revolution in New York or something? Or
I would probably say so. Queens is the most diverse borough in New York City. I was living in Jackson Heights. Jackson Heights probably has the most culture. It has the most people from all over the world living in that community. Jackson Heights is vast in that regard. It has it has the most immigrants, the most undocumented immigrants. Probably who have when a lot of the protests that does happen in Queens it starts there first.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, but it's like I know a lot of people in New York, but most of them are all in Queens. It's kind of funny. I know some others too, but of course that's because I was helping a bunch of people run for office in 2020 who were all in Queens. That makes sense.
Are you from New York originally?
No, I am not. I am originally from California. And then I made the mistake. I say mistake because it was the wrong culture for me. I made the mistake of moving to the Tennessee-Virginia border. So you have to understand the difference between California and the South is that in California, the biggest segregation is money. If you have enough money, unless you're in Orange County or San Diego, because in Orange County or San Diego, there's still really KKK types. But in most of California, the main thing they care about is that you have money. And if you have enough money to be part of the club, then they don't care whether you're black, white, brown, whatever. But You have to have the money. And if you don't have the money, they also don't care who you are or what you are, because you don't have the money. So nothing else matters. Not that there aren't racists in Southern California, or that there aren't even racist parts of California. Like I said, San Diego and Orange County, parts of Central California. But I mean, for the most part, they're just snobs who hate poor people.
Right.
Which is really, really demonstrated by their political machine, which is tremendously good, at least on paper, on all sorts of issues that don't directly affect poor people's wallets, and terrible on anything that would affect poor people's wallets in a good way.
Why do people don't make the relationship between legislation racism versus racism in your face, so to speak? Why do you think people don't make that kind of like distinction?
Well, part of it is that white people still run things, and white people love to give ourselves a pass.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can see it on Twitter, and I'm not saying Twitter is the best example of people from in any demographic necessarily, but and I certainly hope that the majority of white people aren't like the majority of Twitter white people. That would be scary. But jokes aside, white people love to give themselves a pass. One of the best, even though I don't like either one of the most educational things I ever heard was a discussion on Ezra Klein's awful, wimpy podcast. He was talking to David French from the National Review. And he was trying to explain systemic racism to David French. And David French kept trying to explain how racism was just a bad thing in people's hearts. And if you didn't have that bad thing in your heart, you couldn't be racist. And it was this huge disconnect between them as they were trying to explain to each other. And you know, I'm not an Ezra Klein fan, but he got systemic racism mostly right while he was explaining it to David French. Mm-hmm. But David French really could not wrap his brain around anything more than racism is a bad thing in people's heart.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people think that because you know you may not be racist on face value, but if you do things that hurt poor and black, brown people, you know you're still a racist, and people don't look at that as being racist. They look at it as being opportunist.
It's like cops. Cops are an excellent example of how racist white people are.
Right.
Less racist white people will usually not like cops, even if they're not disband the police or abolish the police the way I and most of my friends are.
Right.
Still, most white people who aren't super racist don't like cops.
Right.
My dad, who is a conservative in a lot of ways, but who really understood things like systemic racism and how corrupt the criminal justice system are, told me when I was a kid that cops are just like any other gang, except their colors are the badge.
Right.
And the badge protects them and makes them special compared to those other gangs.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And you know, intellectually, most white people who aren't super racist know that.
Right.
And I don't know how big a slice of the white population it is. Before Trump, I would have said it was tiny and getting smaller every day. And after Trump, I'm not sure anymore. You know what I mean?
Yes, because you do have a lot of Trumpers in New York. So
yeah,
a lot of people think that New York, a lot of people get flabbergasted when I say there's racist people in New York. I says, no, there's racism everywhere. So, you know, even places like New York.
Hey, well, no, heck, my oldest television memory is on Different Strokes, where Conrad Bain looks at Dabney Coleman and says, "Are you a bigot, Tom?" And this really offended voice. and it's just I remember that it's just. I really thought that sort of attitude, and it was, at least in a lot of polite society, but I really thought that sort of attitude where a racist was the worst thing you could be was a lot more common than it really was, because of the way media tried to convince you that it was more common than it really was. So maybe I fell for some of that. Or maybe it was just, things hadn't really broken down so much yet but when Trump actually won the election, I knew it was worse than I had thought. Right. And the only question really is how much worse?
And I bring it up too because even in my community, so I'll give you an example. This has happened this year. So in Kingsbrook Hospital, is a hospital in Brooklyn. I don't live in Brooklyn anymore, but this is an area believe in the Crown Heights area. I forgot exactly where the Kingsbrook Hospital is, but I was working with a group of the doctors and nurses and other people in that community to help them save the Kingsbrook Hospital, because that's a community hospital, and a lot of hospitals in New York is getting shut down, and that's one of them, under Cuomo, obviously. But so now the new governor is taking over that responsibility, and no one has made the correlation between, okay, that hospital being shut down is obviously awful to the community, right? And now we're in a pandemic where we're talking about removing a hospital, and all they're going to do, like they did in Queens, because I used to live in St. Albans. They used to have 4 hospitals in Queens. Now we only have 2. Now this area in Brooklyn, it's going to only have 1 hospital now, and so no one makes the correlation between that is obviously systemic racism, because who's that affecting? It's not that's affecting poor and Black immigrants who live in the community. They don't have a hospital to go to. Now they're going to have to travel to another hospital to go to, and they're going to put
these failed hospitals are never in Brentwood or on Park Avenue.
Never. So they're going to put a parking lot there. They're going to put like a Starbucks there, or McDonald's or something like that. They're going to put there like they did in Queens. And this happens all the time. And this is why I was saying that how corporate America and how our health system is kind of tied together, because they don't look at our health as a value of making money. So when they tear down one of these, when they tear down a hospital and put a parking lot there, they're telling you, the real value they want to have in that community is not you.
Exactly. They want more people to park in that community after coming there from somewhere else and spending money.
Right. And the parking lot, and those parking lots are expensive, obviously. Anyone will tell you that getting
because there's no free parking in New York.
None.
Yeah. None. See, I live in the suburbs out here, outside of Portland. There's no paid parking out here. But you go into Portland, and the more into downtown you get, the less free parking there is.
Right.
And it's just, and that, if you think about that, you really think about that, is that where the people are most concentrated, they're monetizing parking because they know people can't refuse to pay. They're holding people up because
holding them hostage. Right.
Out here, people could find some free place to park.
Right.
Nobody would pay for parking. They'd park across the street and walk.
Right.
So it wouldn't make any sense. But downtown, they can do it.
Right. Well, it's getting more common now too. In New York, having a car, and first of all, is a luxury. You shouldn't have a car in New York, in my opinion, because you don't need a car here. You can travel. You can get to anything you want without a car. We have our mass transit system is the best in the country. I'm not saying that because I'm in New York. I'm just saying that, be honest, like, if you go travel anywhere, you look at our subway system compared to everybody else's. We're the only 24-hour subway system. We really, literally, you can get to anywhere, get to anything that you want.
Our system here is pretty good, but it is not 24 hours. I wish it were.
Yeah, it's not only 24 hours, but you literally can get to any borough, any place, anything you want to get to. And then we have buses. We have bikes. You also have the other. You have the Metro North. You have Amtrak. You have Long Island Railroad. So you have tons of extensive transit to get to anywhere you want to get to in New York.
Yep.
So, Granted, it's pricey, but nothing's more pricey than a car in New York.
Yeah, no, parking and gas would cost more than taking the bus all the time.
Gas alone in New York is insane. It's insane. It's insane. It's like the amount of money my friends spend on gas is more than I spend a month in a MetroCard.
I used to, when I lived in Southern California. Oh my gosh, it's really expensive down there too. Though the other place it's really expensive is San Francisco, where there isn't a single gas station inside the city limits because land costs too much.
No, I know. I was there, and
gas stations are all in the suburbs, right around the city. You have to drive out of the city to get gas.
Yeah, and furthermore, I was learning from a lot of San Franciscans. They were saying that San Francisco is becoming like New York in the sense that you don't need a car. Yep. You can get around in San Francisco without a car. That's crazy.
And the closer to San Francisco the gas station is, the more expensive it is. If it's way out here, it doesn't cost so much. But if it's the first place somebody coming out from San Francisco is going to hit, it costs a fortune.
Right. I can imagine. Yeah. What do you think about the town hall idea? Do you think that works?
I think town halls are always good.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most important proof that town halls are good is all the Congress people who duck them routinely.
Right.
Because they would not be ducking the town halls if the town hall wasn't a forum that was good for the audience to absorb information and be able to learn and interact.
Right.
If they weren't worried about the town halls, they would just have them and snow their way through them like they snow their way through TV commercials.
Right.
But they can't get away with the snow job at the town halls the same way.
Right.
Even people who got reelected, it's hard to remember now, but back in 2017, 2018, Tom Cotton was getting booed all the time at his town halls because he wanted to take their Obamacare away.
Right.
And this wasn't even, he's not even in a state that expanded Medicaid. And yet the people who just hadn't been able to get insurance before, even if they're overpaying for it, or the people who do qualify for Medicaid in Arkansas, those people had their lives so much changed by it. I will give Obamacare credit for this. Mm-hmm. Those people had their lives so much changed by it that they would not give it up no matter what. And Tom Cotton, who got elected there very handily, was getting booed at his own town halls, and people weren't having the BS. But even though they see stuff like that, Democrats can't make the connection. Well, okay, we'll just give them health care and they'll vote for us.
Right. Oh, and speaking of which, too, about Tom Cotton and Obamacare, we're also going to have a letter campaign to Pfizer. I think I mentioned that earlier. We're asking people if they want to send us their first name, last name, their home address, and we will mail these letters on their behalf to Pfizer. And anything else they want us to add if you want us to send your letter, and we'll send the letter and then show Pfizer your medical bills, how much you pay a month for medication, how much you pay for whatever it is. We'll let them know that, Pfizer has the ability to endorse Medicare for all to help push this consciousness into the country. If Pfizer, a big corporation like Pfizer, endorsed Medicare for all, I think that would send a huge shockwave in the pharmaceutical and the healthcare industry. Definitely. And I think, and that would definitely help other politicians to get on board on this. And I think it's a big deal if they do this. So this is why the letter campaign is important, and letting them know that where we're coming from. And then they'll know that we're coming that they can't say, this is we didn't know that this was coming. This is kind of last minute, because it's going to get priority mailed. So I live here in New York already. So the Pfizer building is within 15, 20 minutes away from my home. I can literally have the letter and drop it off on the way to work. Not a problem. So, but I am going to send it off to their office for sure.
That's cool. I think that's another good touch. I don't know how much comes from trying to shame corporations, but it's always worth a try. And if it gets publicity and helps build a movement, that's good too.
Yeah.
I think
I just think it's going to be.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's also fun too. I think it's an action that is going to help bring more people together, because a lot of people, they're starting to awaken to this concept, not just for Medicare for All, but the fact that why is COVID so special? And it energizes people's, I guess, consciousness to not just take anything the media spills them out. So it's spills out rhetoric about this one particular pandemic. Why is this pandemic special than any other scare that we get with healthcare? Why is the flu or any other, again, I mentioned cancer, why is everything else on the table to being free as well?
Well, I will say, and this is not to say that we shouldn't be dealing with cancer too.
Yeah.
But more people died of COVID than cancer in 2020.
I believe that.
And part of it, I hate to give them credit, part of it is that cancer treatment really has gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is, and I hate to sound like I'm making the Biden excuse. I'm not. Biden's failed and made it so much worse. But the simple fact that no one can deny is Donald Trump fucked this country on COVID. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can say lots of things about, Donald Trump wasn't worse than Biden, and a lot of them are true. But and Biden certainly isn't unfucking the country. So I'm not trying to give him credit.
Not at all.
But Donald Trump totally screwed the country on COVID.
Totally agree.
From bringing Americans back from China without a proper quarantine, to closing off travel from China, but not closing off travel from places in Europe where people had just flown to from China.
Right.
I mean, think about it.
Right.
The only reason to just close off travel from China, but not close off travel from France when it originated from China, is because you're trying to be a dick to China. And what good does that do the actual people getting sick in this country?
No, agreed. Totally agree.
And,
no, I'm not. I don't disagree.
He ignored the disease and just let people keep dying and didn't really do anything. Kept saying it would go away.
Right. No, I agree with your sentiment 100%. I'm just saying that all treatment should be free at the point of service.
Definitely.
So,
it should all be. And, that's one of the biggest reasons they're having trouble getting people vaccinated. People don't trust the government after getting screwed over by everybody in the elections and after getting screwed over about relief. And
that's fair.
People should get vaccinated. I believe that people should get vaccinated. I don't like saying it too loudly, but I don't think a vax mandate is a horrible thing if it actually gets more people vaccinated. At the same time, we can't vaccinate our way out of this.
No, I agree with you.
By themselves are never going to be enough.
The problem with the vaccine mandate, I don't think people are anti-vaxxers. I think people are anti-mandate vaccinations. I think that's what the issue is.
I think that it's important. I believe that's true in some cases. I used to be that way myself. There are a lot of people who say they're anti-mandate, but what they're actually doing is trashing the vaccine and saying the vaccine isn't safe and saying that the vaccine is experimental and a lot of other stuff that isn't about the mandate, it's about the vaccine.
Well, they might be right in that regard too. I don't think that people's questioning the vaccine is problematic. I think a lot of people who have issues with that. You're talking to someone who has the second dose already.
Individual people questioning the vaccine is necessarily bad. I think the industry that has popped up in feeding people reasons to question the vaccine is not good.
I disagree. I think people should question. I think people should question it.
When you have people actually lying, it's never good.
No, if you're lying, yes, that's bad. But I think that people prompting questions.
Most of the people who are questioning the vaccine right now, while they're saying some of the right words, they're questioning the vaccine itself because of the lies they're hearing, rather than really questioning the process or the system.
Well, disinformation, I disagree with full stop. So I'm with you in that regard. I'm just saying that what I'm saying is that anyone who is not vaccinated because they don't trust this vaccine, I'm not going to like shun them.
You're not going to shun them, no.
Right. But what I'm saying, because I feel that their concerns are fair concerns. That's what I'm saying. If they had a concern that I felt like wasn't valid, I would say you should get vaccinated. I would make my argument and say they should, because I have some criticisms, like they have criticisms. I can understand where they're coming from. I'm vaccinated because, to be honest with you, because I'm tied to my employment. Like I have 2 kids, I got to pay my rent, I got to make sure my kids are good, so I'm vaccinated. If I didn't have a choice, with that being said, if I didn't have the choice, if I had the choice not to be vaccinated, I wouldn't be vaccinated. I'm vaccinated mainly.
I will say one thing,
and
this is important, and it's really something I believe people who call themselves leftists need to think about more. When we talk about that sort of thing as a personal choice, we're forgetting that there are a lot of people who, for various reasons, either can't get vaxxed themselves, not just for COVID, but for other things too, or are susceptible to a certain degree, even vaccinated, because of their other problems. Those people need a protective layer of healthy vaccinated people around them in order to be safer themselves. That's
I don't think that's
the way the system works. That's how why vaccines are effective.
Well, I don't think that's fair, because the government did that to themselves, though. You see what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure.
No, nobody did that to themselves. People did that to those people. Now, my wife is one of those people. My wife has diabetes. My wife has asthma. My wife is vulnerable. I have to be vaccinated because my wife is vulnerable.
No. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I'm not talking about that, because my friend of mine, I think he has TMJ, I believe that's what it's called, and he can't get vaccinated, and so he's like in this weird hybrid situation.
And there are people who can't, and
right.
I'm talking about them too.
Right. And I'm not talking about those folks who can't be vaccinated because they have other preconditions. So that's not their fault. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that the fear of being vaccinated by most Americans, that's the government's fault. That's not their fault.
No, the fear of being vaccinated by most Americans is very deliberately stoked. The government has responsibility for it, but it's not their fault. For instance, in California, in Los Angeles, they had a recent anti-vax protest that was completely astroturfed by Proud Boys. Everybody at that protest is all the people who show up here in Portland for Proud Boy protests. It's the most hilarious thing. The same people who show up here are in protests in Los Angeles. And up here, they're here to beat people up at anti-ICE protests or anti-cop protests. And down there, they're protesting against vaccines.
But isn't that separate issue, though? Don't you think?
No, it's not. That's the whole thing, is that the Proud Boys are specifically pushing it. And the reason that people specifically push that is because there are particular communities that are vulnerable to that kind of propaganda because of their history. And this propaganda deliberately targets them.
Well, propaganda
deliberately encourages that skepticism.
But what I'm saying, to that point, Americans at large, we're being propagandized 24/7. So
Definitely.
we can't use one issue and think that, is higher than all the other issues.
Telling people not to get vaccinated during a plague is pretty high priority.
Well, again, that's not their fault, though. That's my point.
The person who's saying don't get vaccinated during a plague is choosing to say that, and that is their fault.
No, I'm not saying that's not true. I'm saying that sentiment of not trusting the vaccine, that is coming from somewhere. We got to be honest about that. Yes. That's coming from the mistrust of the government. That's a fair criticism.
But the anti-vaxxers don't mistrust the government. They're all vaccinated, which is the gross part.
I'm not saying that. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just telling you that where that's coming from. That's mainly coming from the distrust of the government.
Well, believing them is coming from the distrust of the government. The people saying that are in bed with people who run the government. I mean,
right. And I'm not saying those people don't have an agenda. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that where that sentiment is coming from is a deep-rooted problem that we have never addressed. And that's my point.
And we need to fix those problems. That's absolutely true.
Right. And so how do we fix that?
We need healthcare. I mean, among other things, we need to get rid of the cops.
Right. True.
We need to overthrow the government, but that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Now you sound like my friend Roman. He feels the exact same way.
Well, I mean, the simple fact is that this system, beyond the systemic racism problem, which is real and which is there from the beginning and which is deliberate. And there's a whole show that could be done about how that was deliberately created in this country.
Right.
But that aside, it's the system itself is designed to favor a handful of rich people and protect them from the poor people who might want to take some of their stuff.
Right.
Madison specifically says this in one of the Federalist Papers, where in order to be protected from the majority, the minority needs a firm foothold in the government. And he was not talking about any sort of racial minority in that point, because only white people who own property voted. So who was he talking about? Who was the minority Madison wanted to protect? Rich landowners like himself.
Right.
And that's in the Constitution from the beginning, along with racism. Right. And that combination of racism and classism is the poison America is built on. And it's why so much of what America touches dies or is imperfect.
Right. Do you think one day soon we'll have an overthrow of the government?
So
every empire falls. Let's look back at history.
Every empire falls, and this is where it starts to get what I really hope for versus what I really expect.
Right.
I would love to believe that we can get fired up and we can do this, and there'll be a general strike or a revolution of some kind. And we will be able to put in a new system, be it communist or direct democracy or a federation or whatever. We'll be able to start having that argument about what we want the new system to be. Once we make sure everyone has health care, that comes first, and a home, and a few other things. But once everybody's material needs are taken care of, we can start talking about what we want to do with the future. But right now, they're making sure no one's material needs are being taken care of. The system is designed to deny our material needs.
Right.
We have to get rid of that system and replace it to have our needs met.
Right.
Now, empires usually do not fall at the core first.
Right.
Which means we have to go through a lot more stuff like Afghanistan or Vietnam or what have you before our empire falls at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how long that's going to take. I think the most important thing right now is to protest for healthcare, to protest against the evil shit we're doing overseas,
Right.
and to talk about the way things really are to try to wake people up and get them out of the cave. Because you asked before why people don't do things, and I said it goes back to Greek philosophy.
Right.
And while Plato said a lot of stupid stuff, one of the really smart things he said was that we're in a cave,
right.
and we see shadows on the wall and we think they're real.
Right.
And if we go out of the cave, we're blind and we can't see anything. So we think the cave is normal. But if we stay out of the cave long enough and our eyes get used to the sunlight, we see the reality and not just the shadows on the wall.
Right.
And that's really the difference, is that people who are on the political left, even if they are still liberal in some senses, to some extent have seen what's really going on and not just the shadows on the wall.
Right.
Whereas most Americans are still watching the shadows and thinking they're real.
Right. So do you think we have a fixed system?
I think we have it's not even that we have I think fixed is actually probably a pretty good way to describe it. I mean, we have a system that is designed to have just enough upward mobility for people to think maybe they have a chance.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody like Pete Buttigieg, who isn't rich but ends up going to Harvard on a full scholarship, somebody decided to make him successful for a reason.
Right.
Somebody like Bill Clinton, who goes to Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship and comes back and joins the elite.
Right.
Someone gave him that leg up for a reason.
Right.
George W. Bush became the richest president ever because at every point in his life where he failed, there was a friend of his dad's waiting with a bag of money.
Right.
So,
right.
Of course, the system is rigged.
Right, of course.
Even when it looks like somebody has done made good, there's often something else there, too. There's some reason they've made good, some connection.
Right. Who do you think was the best president in a lifetime? When I mean best president, I don't mean the actual was a good president. I mean like who did less harm to the country.
That's so hard.
All presidents are war criminals.
They all are. Every single one in my lifetime. I was born in 1977.
Mm-hmm.
So Jimmy Carter is the first president in my lifetime.
That would have been a president I would have said too. He's probably like the best president.
But the thing to remember is that even Jimmy Carter didn't become a good guy until after he wasn't president anymore.
Right. Right.
People don't remember that Jimmy Carter was the guy who went on TV and told Americans to turn off their lights earlier at night.
Right.
And Americans hate being told stuff like that.
Right.
But even more importantly than that, he was also the guy who really started austerity.
Mm-hmm.
It was his Fed that created a recession in order to prevent inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just depressing stuff happened.
Right.
And Reagan
He's the worst.
Reagan was the worst, one of the worst people ever. I still think W gives Reagan a close run for his money.
Really? I would say Reagan's probably the worst.
Well, W killed 1 million Iraqis.
That's true.
Plus, we don't know how many people actually got killed in Afghanistan.
That's true, too.
We know it's a big number.
It's a big number, yeah.
We don't know how many people were being killed by black ops in all these little corners of the war on terror around the world. Because remember, under W, we had Green Berets in the Philippines. Right. We had Green Berets in East Timor killing people for the Indonesians. The stuff that's going on in China that everybody's so angry about now with the Uyghurs. Right. That's going on because we at one point were helping China do that.
Right. I was going to say you bring up a good
our
point.
Terror list.
I was going to say you bring up a good point. I was going to say Obama could also be added to that. I think Obama did worse than W. He brought us to 2 wars of 7, which is insane.
Well, and that's where it gets so complicated because Obama. And this is why it's so much easier to hate Obama, because he let people down. I mean, no liberal or leftist thought W was going to pass universal health care or legalize gay marriage or anything like that.
Right.
But people thought Obama was going to help them.
Right. Funny enough, the first time I ever voted was the last election cycle. I voted for Jesse Ventura because I like Jesse Ventura, and I didn't know that you can vote and you can write a candidate name in. I never knew that, and I think that's done on purpose for the American people not to know how you can vote in this country.
Oh,
definitely. But I was gonna vote for Obama the second time. I was like, let me see what he does the first term. If I like this, because I like everything he was saying, because I was very hesitant about voting. I never voted before. I didn't trust any politician. So I didn't vote for him. But I was like, I like what stuff he's saying. Let's see what he does the first term. If he does good the first term, I'll vote for him the second term. Did not like anything he did the first term. Nothing. I was like, this guy was such a disappointment. The first term was a disappointment.
So I have to say selfishly that I was one of the people who got health care because of the Medicare expansion here in Oregon.
Mm-hmm. Don't be ashamed of that. Expansion. Don't be ashamed of that.
And because I got help when I needed it, I had a better opinion of Obama than I would have had if I hadn't gotten help when I needed it.
That's fair.
But it's also important to understand that I didn't actually get that help until the second term because of how ridiculously long it took for Obamacare to take effect.
Listen, if Trump passed Medicare for all, he would have won his second term easily. He would have won. And I don't like the guy. He would have voted for him.
Well, let's be honest.
Right.
The only reason Biden won was because of Trump's COVID failure.
Right.
I believe that if it weren't for COVID and the way that Trump stepped on his dick,
he would have won.
He would have won. If Trump had actually done a competent job, even halfway competent.
You know what he would have did? You know what he could have done? If he made Make America Great masks and gave them out for free during COVID, I guarantee he would have won.
Yes, 100%. You're right.
100%.
You're right.
He would say, everyone wear a mask, everybody. Here's free masks for everybody. Get ready masks. That's all he had to do.
I'll tell you a secret. I know this because a former friend who's gone weird now, but a former friend who lives in Florida let me know that despite all the anti-masking stuff down there, and yes, he's done horrible things, Ron Paul, because he was buddies with Trump, had lots of masks. and made sure that all the mayors he liked in Florida had free masks to give to everybody in their towns.
That's
Only the mayors he liked.
That's crazy. Wow.
And Trump made sure that states like Florida and other Republican states where people liked him got masks and stuff. And that places where people didn't like him didn't get masks.
If he would have gave out free masks to every American, would make America great on it, he would have won.
Of course he would have.
He didn't have to do nothing else. Just that one thing.
If DeSantis wins re-election in Florida, it's going to be because he gave people free masks. They'll forget all the stupid stuff he did because he gave them free masks early on.
Right. They're like, oh, he cares about me. Oh, my God. No, you dope. He just wants you to vote for him.
Hey, but you know, if it saved lives, who cares if he really cares or not? So let's be honest. Let's be totally honest. Bernie cares about us. I really believe that. I do. I'm not going to say that he acts on it in the way he should, but he really cares about us, and he really does try to do the best he can within the system to make things as much better as he can. Sure, great. But Joe Biden doesn't care about us.
Right.
But if Joe Biden gave us Medicare for all tomorrow, would you care that he didn't care about us? Would you care that it wasn't Bernie?
No. I'll take it. Listen, I take wins where I can get them.
Exactly. No.
I don't need
and it's so
I don't need to know about that.
And people like to talk about Biden's empathy, which is so fake.
Right.
But all that aside, if he would actually do so, if he actually kept some of his promises,
right,
I might have grudgingly said, okay, this is actually a little better.
It's a good thing. I would say you did a good thing.
Yeah.
I would say you did a good thing. Right. I don't see nothing wrong with that.
He couldn't even keep promises like free community college for 2 years.
Right.
He couldn't even keep promises like free childcare. They took that out of the bill.
Right.
He couldn't keep his promise. And remember, Hillary Clinton promised better. And if there's any criticism of anybody, it's saying that Hillary Clinton promised more than them.
Which is crazy.
But even his Medicare expansion, the lowering the age to 60 and adding dental and vision, that got taken out. None of that stuff is still in there.
Right.
And I can't it's not even that it's not just that it's not better. It's again like Obama, he deliberately broke his promises to people.
Right. Well, I expected that though. I didn't.
Of course, I did too.
Yeah. I
was telling people Biden's not going to let kids out of cages.
Nope.
He's not going to give anybody health care. He's not going to forgive anybody's student debt. He's not going to stop police from shooting people.
Nope.
And people said, but we're going to be so much safer under Biden than under Trump. It's going to be easier for us to organize. We won't have all these people trying to kill us all the time. It's like, no. That's all going to keep up under Biden.
Right.
And it has. They're still prosecuting people like terrorists for protesting the cops while they're letting people go for the January 6th stuff. Now, think about that. People who are protesting the cops killing people are being charged as terrorists, while people who invaded the Capitol and made members of our government fear for their lives are being let go with slaps on the wrist. Is there anything more ridiculous than that? I mean, I'm not saying I love our government or that some of them didn't deserve to be scared. But I mean, if we really cared about the things that we say we care about as a country, we wouldn't be charging people as terrorists for protesting oil pipelines and cops. And we wouldn't be letting people go from invading the Capitol building with slaps on the wrist. And let's be honest, we wouldn't be having cops in front of Congress to make the Capitol Police look like heroes after we saw cops let them in the first place in the original coverage of the riot.
Why is that also too slept on or like put under the rug? I don't understand how Americans don't really think about how like that's impossible. It's almost damn near impossible for just a group of people to ambush the Capitol. People don't realize there's like 8 police districts in Washington, D.C. alone. They have more police there than any other place in the United States. It's almost impossible to do that. Just randomly, people would just like just seize the Capitol. That's almost impossible. Like, you have to realize that was just an inside job. I don't see how people just don't look at that and understand that.
The only cops more highly trained and quote unquote elite in DC than the Capitol Police are the Secret Service in the White House.
Right. It's crazy. It's crazy to me that we look at that like that people can just do that. No, you can't. You can't do that.
And they showed the film of the guy beating the cop up with the flagpole.
Right.
They showed all sorts of film of cops getting beat up. They brought the Capitol cops in front of Congress to testify about how they were traumatized. And it's just
blows my mind.
How traumatized were the cops? I mean, I hate to give credence to the feelings of our Congress, but if we're kind of laughing a little bit at some of the things our Congress people said about being traumatized, then we certainly shouldn't believe the cops are traumatized.
No, not at all.
What traumatized the cops the most was that other white people beat them up. Just like what traumatized the January 6th rioters the most was that some of the cops tried to stop them.
Right.
Because you saw it on both sides. Even the cops described the January 6th people as saying to the cops, hey, you're on our side. You're like us.
Right.
We know that a bunch of the January 6th protesters were actually cops.
Right.
Who just didn't wear their uniforms to D.C.
Right.
We know others were politicians in office. State senators and the like.
Right. Right.
All this stuff going on. And we listen to the cops talk about how the January 6th people were shocked. You listen to the radio where the one lady says, why are the cops shooting at us? We're on their side. And so it's just ridiculous.
Right. Do you think our movement needs to get on mainstream media to make a difference? Because you know the whole saying though, the movement will not be televised. I actually think differently. I actually think that we need to get on the mainstream media to make our voice heard.
If we can make the evening news, that's good. Right. And I think you're right that we need to.
Right.
The problem is that how often is Cornel West on MSNBC?
True.
And then the second question is, no matter how much you love Cornel West, is he radical enough for you?
Right.
And so if Cornel West isn't really allowed on MSNBC very much, then what chance do we have?
Well, we got to get arrested.
No, that's a big part of it, potentially.
Right.
Yes.
Right. We got to get arrested for healthcare.
We can make news if we're shot.
Right.
I don't recommend getting shot.
No, I don't recommend getting shot either. Right. It would be huge. Healthcare activists got shot during a healthcare protests.
If a few people go to jail, charges terrorists for protesting for health care, that would make the news.
That would make the news. Yeah. Make world news too, actually. That's
I
important.
would hope so.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, we got stuff in the pipeline. We got to think about that.
No, I agree. And I've said, obviously there's a limit to what you can say and how you say it.
Right.
But without advocating violence, which I do not advocate violence, I believe in the right to self-defense, but I do not advocate violence.
Agreed.
I believe that people need to be willing. People need to understand that they need to be willing to risk prison or death.
Right.
It's not enough. It's not enough to say you want to protest.
Right.
It's not enough. It's not enough even necessarily to protest. It's you have to be willing when it comes right down to it. You have to be willing to risk prison or death. It sounds silly.
It's not.
Maybe we'll never get to it. But one of the reasons that I'm not anonymous on Twitter and that I do a show is because I want to be out there and public, and I want to be able to say, this is me. I'm not afraid. I'm not going to hide who I am or be anonymous. I'm going to stand up and say things as myself.
Right.
And even if that means consequences.
Right.
And it may never come to that. I would love it if it never comes to that.
Right.
But there's no guarantee that it won't come to that. It's very possible it will come to that.
No, I agree. Yeah, no, I want more disruptions in far as protests concerned. I want to do more direct actions, but the direct actions are more arrestable actions. It needs to happen. We need to turn it up. People need to.
I definitely can see that. People need to know the risk they're taking, and they need to be willing to take it. But that's really the sort of thing it's going to take.
Right. No, I agree. Totally agree. Yeah.
But I think that's some of the biggest problem is I don't know how much risk or sacrifice some people are willing to make. And this is sort of, I sort of think about this when I think about some of the really aggressive anti-vaccine positions.
Mm-hmm.
It's, what are you willing to do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if it's a simple thing, like if you're not willing to do a simple thing like get vaccinated during a plague, are you willing to do anything harder?
But if you live in a place like New York, it's impossible for you to be an anti-vaxxer because you can't get a job.
Sure, no, I know what you mean.
And so the more the mask mandates, I think more of those people who have those who are anti-vaxxer, they're in states where it's not mandated, or they got money because you can't survive in New York without being vaccinated. It's not possible. It's not possible here.
I'm sure it's not.
Yeah, you can't do it.
But that's kind of the point. The people who most want that propaganda out there want people in places like New York not to make it. And they want very specific people in places not like New York not to make it. They want poor people and immigrants not to make it. I've had Brooke Binkowski on the show to talk about passive eugenics before.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole bunch of rich white people who just want less poor people.
Oh no, their eugenicists are real. I was talking to a friend of mine about this. That's why it's one of the reasons why we don't have Medicare for all. You can't really say that publicly, but I really feel that it's real.
it's a big reason
Right.
that the anti-vax thing started even before COVID, because there have been anti-vaxxers for as long as there have been vaccines.
Oh yeah.
And it's always trying to scare people out of taking the vaccines.
Right.
And the reason is always the same. They want poor people to be more likely to die, and they don't want poor people to miss work.
You think, but you also you don't think the other two could be true? There could also be there's something wrong with the vaccine. You don't think that it could be possible?
I
That's
will
also
tell
a
you
possibility.
why I don't think there's anything wrong with the vaccine.
Well, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying there isn't.
All the important people in our country have taken it, number one.
Well,
Number
we know
two,
that
Bill Gates wouldn't be trying to stop it from going to India and Brazil and South Africa if there were something wrong with it. He'd be letting it go.
Well, that's part of my question. My question is that how do we know that the vaccine that they're giving the duopoly is the right vaccine and the one they're giving us is not?
See, that's the whole thing, is that you have to ask yourself who gains from that and how.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. We don't know. That's my point I'm making.
Well, but that's the whole thing, though, is if you don't know who gains from it, then there's not even a motive to do it.
Well,
my point is, the first thing is, what's the motive? Now, with population control, this is something that I've read about.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I'm an expert. I'm not going to use the word studied. It's something I've read about. I think that too many people say studied when they mean I read a website.
Right. I agree with that.
And so it's something I've read about in books, on websites. I've talked about it with people who know more than me. It's something I try to learn about. I'm not pretending to be an expert, but they don't want too many people in places where they want to take stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about Brazil, there's lots of agriculture there. There's lots of lumber there. There's lots of raw materials. I'm pretty sure that there's still some minerals in some places in Brazil. Venezuela, there's lots of places to explore for lithium. South Africa has gold and diamonds. India is the biggest, has the biggest untapped economic potential in the world. And the last thing that American billionaires want is for India to overtake America as an economic superpower.
Right.
So, and what was I saying earlier? Brazil used to be a rival of the United States. The reason it's not anymore has a lot to do with the CIA and other American interference in their politics going back before there was a CIA.
So you're in your mind, you think that the anti-vaxxers started with like people in the higher up to make sure poor and black brown people don't be vaccinated.
So basically, yes. I mean, and it comes down to targeting people who have reasons not to trust the government. But at the same time, they're also the people you want to get rid of. Right. Because the way to think about it, and this is very important, is they don't want to get rid of everybody. They want to get rid of what Ebenezer Scrooge called surplus population.
Right.
Now, what's surplus population? Surplus population is old people, disabled people, and people who do not work 40 hours a week or more for them.
Right.
Everybody who falls into one of those three categories is surplus population. And they don't care what happens to them. Everybody else, outside, of course, the people actually at the top and the people they care about, everybody else is labor. And they're going to give us the least they possibly can to keep us working.
Right.
Because the number one rule of their world is to minimize labor costs.
Right.
And our government has that same attitude as our oligarchs.
Right.
Because the oligarchs give them the money that they use to run for office. And more importantly, they have relationships with the oligarchs.
Right.
The money isn't as important as the relationships.
Right.
What's $10,000 from a billionaire?
Right.
I mean, really think about it. What's $10,000 from a billionaire?
Nothing.
Even when you're looking at a super PAC, what's $2 or $3 million from a billionaire?
Nothing.
One billionaire gives you $2 or $3 million. What does that really mean? Now, that said, the money and favors changing hands build relationships.
Right.
And when the people in government want something from the billionaires, they can go to the billionaires and get it. But the flip side of that is when the billionaires want something from the government never says no.
Right.
And that relationship is the real corruption, not the money itself, as bad as the money itself is.
Right.
That's why you still see that corruption in the form of relationships in Canada and the UK, even though those elections are paid for publicly.
Right.
And that's why getting money out of elections by itself will never be the solution.
Right. I agree with that.
But a lot of people don't think about the relationships. They just see the money, and they don't think about the relationship that the money represents.
Right. Totally agree.
The real problem isn't that the guy who runs Comcast gives Joe Biden a couple $1 million to run for president. The real problem is that the guy who runs Comcast is good enough buddies with Joe Biden to give him a couple $1 million to run for president.
Right. Right.
And that's really...
you can't stop that. That's something you can't stop.
Yeah. And the only way to stop it is to completely change the relationship between the state and the oligarchs.
How would you do that? What would be a plan to do that? In a perfect world, what would you be able to do that?
In a perfect world, I don't want to talk about a perfect world. I don't want to talk about a perfect world because even though I'm an anarchist and not a Marxist, right, I think it's important not to be idealistic and instead to focus on scientific possibilities based on what's happened and what our real realities are.
So what would be a real reality from this in the context?
If you look at Venezuela as a mild example, when they had their banking scandal just before Hugo Chavez died, Hugo Chavez started putting bankers in prison the same way that in China, when they had their banking scandal, the Chinese government started shooting bankers. In the US, we bailed the banks out.
Right.
So in those kinds of countries, which even though they never were necessarily what some purists might call socialist, those countries made a distinct effort to control the oligarchs instead of letting the oligarchs control the country. That's why all those bankers in Venezuela ran to Florida. That's why all the rich people in Cuba are now rich people in Miami.
Right.
That's why so many people got their heads chopped off in the French Revolution.
Right.
I believe you have to have a government that sees capitalism and capitalists as a dangerous creature that needs to be kept on a very short leash and in its place.
Right. So capital punishment for bankers. I love it.
And I'm not advocating for capital punishment. That's a historical example of things that have happened and can be done.
I think that's the only way, though. That might be the only way, though, right, Chris?
It's true. It might be.
It might be the only way.
I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of killing people. I don't think we ever should, but...
Well, I feel, and people may call me crazy, I feel that politicians, bankers, and CEOs, There's sociopaths. There's psychopaths. So how do you deal with a sociopath or a psychopath?
Then I'll ask you a serious question. Then,
No.
Do you think cops can ever be mainstreamed back into civilian society?
No.
Yeah, see, that's a tough that's a tough challenge.
You know why I say no? Because the same reason why I have family members who went to the military, and that kind of training, that kind of mind, that kind of regiment training never escapes them. You can't get that out of you.
Makes sense.
And so police the same way. I'm pretty sure if you've been a cop for like X amount of years, it's probably more so than someone who's been into the military for less time. I think the amount of years you've been in something like that, you can't shake that. You can't go back from being a cop and going to being a civilian. I don't think it works that way. I think once you're a cop, you're always a cop. It's ingrained in you.
I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that. I will on the one hand, cops are horrible. ACAB, I believe that.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, Frank Serpico was a real person.
Frank Serpico was a real person.
I know. He's on Twitter. He follows me.
I should follow him now too, actually. I didn't know that.
But yeah, Frank Serpico was a real person, and he really did what he really did. The movie with Al Pacino is actually not that far-fetched compared to reality.
But also, too, like, he was a person that going into it automatically was opposed to that lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel a lot of cops, they're signing up to be a dick. They're like, I get the opportunity.
He really believed that he was signing up to be a good guy and save people and protect society and all that.
Right.
Oh.
Right. So you have to be a person that kind of like against that.
Quaker Socialist is asking who. Sonia, we're talking about Frank Serpico. If you've ever, he was a narcotics cop in New York who testified against crooked cops.
Right.
And instead of being given medals and being made chief of police and being given the kind of reward that a cop who busts bad cops like that should get, he was shot in the face and run out of the police force.
Right. Yeah, you know Sonia too? I love Sonia. She's great.
Yes, she's great. I love Sonia.
Yeah.
And now Frank Serpico's on Twitter. It's great. But yeah, and with that, so I mean, that's a real person. He was a real cop. He did the right thing in an impossible situation when almost no other cop ever has.
For a reason. Cops, I'm pretty sure there are probably other cops that feel the same way, but they feel
there are
like
other cops who have done similar things, but it's
for sure.
Very rare.
For sure. He's afraid to do something, so I understand that.
And even Serpico, and I'm not trying to be mean to Frank, he's a great guy, but even Frank Serpico didn't report the corrupt cops because they were corrupt. He was willing to just not take the money and leave it at that.
Right.
He reported the corrupt cops because just by not taking the money, they didn't trust him and harassed him and threatened him and committed acts of violence against him.
Right.
That's the reason he reported them, not because they were taking the money. He was willing to just not take the money and look the other way. That wasn't good enough for them. They demanded he take the money.
Right.
And he only did what he did because he was forced to do what he did in order to survive. And even then, he almost got killed. The bullet that went through his face missed his brain by that much.
Right.
According to the documentaries, anyway.
Right.
And but even in that situation, it was self-defense and survival rather than this is wrong.
Right.
This is wrong was why he wouldn't take the money.
Right.
But he wasn't going to rat on fellow cops until they betrayed him.
Right. I mean, if I was in a situation, I probably would have done the same thing. Actually, to be honest with you, I would have looked the other way. Nah, I'm good. I'm not taking this money. I'm all right.
But I mean, and that's something that's happened to other cops in other places too, where the reason they did the right thing was because they were harassed until they did the right thing
Right.
by people for whom just not narking wasn't enough.
Right.
Like they couldn't believe that this guy wouldn't eventually narc if he didn't partake in the corruption.
Right.
And so eventually you either succumb to the pressure and partake
Right.
in the corruption, or you crack and narc.
Right.
And
I think politicians work the same way. Actually,
I
yeah,
think you're right.
yeah. I think politics and police force are very similar in the sense. I think a lot of politicians just fold and just seduce to the corruption. I don't think every politician running for office is a bad person. I think they succumb to the system, the political system.
No, and that's what I mean. So let's just take the Democratic Party.
Right.
So there are Democrats who don't take corporate money. That's
Right.
great. But do they take DCCC money?
Right.
Because the DCCC takes corporate money.
Right.
Do they take money from the congressional leadership PAC of a colleague who takes corporate money for his congressional leadership PAC? There are
Right.
all these extra factors that go
Right.
into it. And if your PAC is taking money from BlackRock and your PAC is paying for stuff for my campaign to help me get elected, well, doesn't that mean I've taken money from BlackRock too?
Yep.
Even though I haven't taken a dime from them personally. You helped get me elected with your money.
Right.
And it's still my campaign, even if it's your money.
Right.
If I don't do what BlackRock wants, they're not going to be happy with you.
Right.
So you're not going to be happy with me. And if I want you to be happy with me, I'm going to do what you want, which is going to be what BlackRock wants.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that extra bit of pressure. They just see so-and-so doesn't take corporate money.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think they all, in some way, do take corporate money for sure. No, no one in politics has clean hands.
I'm sure there are corporations. I mean, well, we don't know who, but I'm sure there are corporations who gave to our revolution to feel better about themselves.
Oh yeah.
I'm not saying that they necessarily wanted Bernie to win. I'm just saying they gave to our revolution, or they gave to National Nurses United because they wanted to feel better about themselves.
Right.
And that money also ends up influencing whoever got it, even if it's only in a small way.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's like the people who are mad because Jeff Bezos gave money to some nonprofits that were funding land back for indigenous people. He did that to feel better about himself.
Why are the people mad about that?
They're mad about that because they think now it means Bezos owns the indigenous movement, basically. It's like a George Soros conspiracy theory about Jeff Bezos.
Right.
They give that money to influence people a little bit and to feel better about themselves.
Right.
Yes, that money can corrupt an organization eventually.
Right.
And that shouldn't be ignored. But it should never be assumed from one donation that somebody owns an organization either.
Right. Well, I think there's something to be said. Like, if Jeff Bezos donated money to the March for Medicare for All, I think most of the members of my coalition would turn down the money, but there are some members of the coalition who want to take the money for sure.
Well, I mean, when you really think about it, when you really think about it, it'd be really hard not to take the money. I'm not
Well,
saying that I could say
right,
I couldn't say no,
right,
but it'd be really hard not to take the money if you're really doing something important, and this is money that you can use to do that important thing somehow.
right. I would hope that money would come with an endorsement.
Yeah, no, I'd rather have an endorsement from some of those folks than their money anyway.
No, yeah, that's the point I'm making.
Yeah.
I would hope that it would come with an endorsement. Like, because
Definitely.
I'm not one of these people. Like, if let's say, like, if Domino's or Dunkin' Donuts or Amazon said, yeah, we believe in Medicare for all and we like this coalition, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I wouldn't say, get out of here, Dunkin' Donuts, get out of here, Domino's, get out of here, Amazon. I don't want them slapping their name with the March for Medicare for All. I'll be okay with that. I don't have to like the corporation or have to like the people who are running it for them to agree that we should have Medicare for all.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, but usually money comes from some type of like an exchange. Like, I'm giving you this money, so I need you to do this for me. It's never because
like we were
a relationship, right? It's never about like I'm donating this money because I want you. I believe in the cause.
No, at the very best, it's I'm donating this money because I want to feel better about myself because I know I'm a rich shit.
Right.
That's the best case scenario.
Right. That is the best case scenario. Right. The best case scenario. Right.
I believe a lot of George Soros's donations are genuinely, I'm sorry, I'm a rich shit donations. I believe he does bad stuff too. It's important to be realistic about that.
Right.
He's too rich to be pure, and nobody would stay that rich if they were pure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, someone who can afford to solve homelessness should be solving homelessness. I don't care how many good causes he uses his money for.
Right. Do you think they stop people from doing that though? Let's say if I was a billionaire, right? And I said I got my billions of dollars and I want to stop world hunger. Do you think there's a conversation? No, we don't do that. No,
so
we don't.
I don't think they would even. It's that I don't think it would even occur to people.
Right.
I don't think it needs to. I don't think there needs to be that degree of intimidation.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the jokes about Kennedy, or the jokes about the newly elected president watching a reel of the Kennedy assassination that looks like it was shot from the grassy knoll.
Right.
Those jokes are funny, sure, but why would they need to intimidate people? I mean, for the most part, most people are in the cave, like we were saying.
Right.
And the more powerful and wealthy you are, the more you're insulated from reality. Money protects you from reality. If you have money, you don't have to live in the real world with the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always the people with money who are telling us to grow up. It's the real world. But they don't live in the real world. Their money keeps them out of it. We live in the real world.
Right. So you think rich people are the ones who are stuck in the matrix?
Yes, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is they control that matrix too, because they control the government.
Right.
The government acts for their interests because the Constitution is written for their interests.
Right.
And with that in mind, it doesn't matter who we elect, the government will still, to some degree, always act in their interest, even if we elected communists.
Mm-hmm.
In the system we have now. That's one of the reasons it has to go.
Right.
I don't know if that's going to happen in our lifetime. It may not. It may be that the only thing that we can do in our lifetime is organize a movement. We may not even see reform in our lifetime. I hope we do.
Right.
I think we can see Medicare for all in our lifetime. I don't think it's impossible.
I always tell people my prediction. I think we can get it by 2031. That's my prediction.
It's possible.
Yeah, I think we can do it. Yeah.
I try to have revolutionary optimism. Revolutionary optimism and revolutionary discipline are the two things I'm working on.
Yeah, I agree with you. A mass revolution probably won't happen in our lifetime, but I think that piece of legislation like Medicare for all is very doable. Very, very doable.
It is. I think it's possible.
Yeah, we need a revolution though. Every empire, we said it earlier, every empire falls. So,
Yeah.
well, ours are definitely starting to see the cracks on the wall.
Yeah, no, I think we're going to see a few more situations like Afghanistan, where we start a war somewhere that then drains us on the frontiers.
Right.
Because, well, even though it was the barbarians that actually sacked Rome, the reason Rome fell is because they kept fighting wars with Persia, which you don't hear about nearly as much. You hear about the barbarians,
Right.
but Rome and Persia both wore each other out.
Right.
And Rome broke in two, and the Western Empire fell, and the Eastern Empire was still there. And they still wore each other out. And one of the reasons that the caliphate, the original caliphate, overtook the Middle East so quickly was because the Byzantine Empire and the Persians were still wearing each other out, fighting each other. And when the Byzantine Empire finally defeated the Persians, they were tired and ready to rest. And they immediately had to fight Arabs.
Right.
And so they lost.
Right.
Their heart wasn't in it. They didn't want to fight anymore.
And you think that's going to happen? You think that's going to happen here in America?
I think it's going to happen eventually. I don't know when.
Right. Because that's something that always came to mind. If United States is this boogeyman that we know them as, how come the other countries haven't retaliated to the degree that?
Well, because it's not just the U.S. You've got NATO.
Right.
You've got the United Nations.
Right.
It's really important to understand, even though America complains about it all the time, it's really important to understand how the United Nations legitimizes America to the rest of the world.
Right.
And how America's position in the United Nations gives it power over the rest of the world.
Right.
And then NATO is, of course, a military alliance. Members of NATO are willing to fight for each other.
Right.
The reasons they'll do it and where they'll do it may vary, but members are willing to fight each other. Australia went into Vietnam with us.
Right.
The whole UN went into Korea with us. It's not there are lots of people who are invested in the US staying in charge, and those people are willing to believe that they're doing good.
Right.
I mean, nobody wants to believe they're the bad guys.
Right.
I mean, I don't believe Ronald Reagan believed he was a bad guy. We can talk about him being evil all we want. I don't think Ronald Reagan believed he was evil.
Well, I don't think people who are evil ever think they're evil.
Exactly. That's the
problem. I don't ever think that. Right. They're doing it. They think they're doing a just thing.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And this is a good question. Wars are a big distraction. Will we have a new 9/11? Will they organize something as an excuse? Well, so we've got the China stuff. We've got the Russia stuff. What's all that?
Right.
We've got excuses now for a war in the Ukraine, if it ever comes to it. We've got excuses for a war with China, if it ever comes to it.
Right. Yeah. I think that a war with China is probably happen in our lifetime for sure.
And if it doesn't, then we're going to get a Cold War with China, like the Cold War with the USSR.
For sure. That's something
And
that's something more likely is a
and
Cold War
that will
returning.
wear and that will be how we in China wear each other out. And
Right.
somebody like India will take over because China and the US wear each other out. That's how history has generally gone.
Right. Do you think India has enough military power to do that?
So, like I said, first America and China have to wear each other out. Obviously,
Right.
India has to put all its economic potential to work as something more than just cheap labor for the US.
Right.
But that aside, they have very highly educated workforce in India.
Right.
They have a lot of people and a lot of resources. If they were given the necessary credit to make use of their people and resources and and um, and systems, they could easily do it. Um, Simply because they would be able to be the new United States. I mean, remember that Russia won World War II, but Russia won World War II with U.S. guns and tanks.
Right.
The U.S. was building weapons of war for Stalin and Churchill long before we actually joined the war.
Mm-hmm.
And we were building, and after we joined the war, we were sending Russia guns and tanks before we ever invaded Europe ourselves. And we built a whole Pacific fleet at the same time we were arming Russia. After Pearl Harbor, we rebuilt the battleships. We built new carriers while we were arming Russia. Think about that industrial capacity. Could we do that
Right.
now?
I think so.
We don't have the factories now. We would have to build new factories to do that. We would have to open new hospitals to do that. They're all the capability that we used to have to do those things has been outsourced to India and China.
Mm-hmm.
If we went to war with China, we would be going to war with the country that has all our factories.
Mm.
Think about that for a moment.
Right. So you don't think countries like China, you don't think like China would be afraid to go to war with the United States?
I don't think China wants to go to war with the United States.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just
I
saying
think they might be afraid, but I mean, if you back somebody into the wall, what are they going to do?
right. Because we always hear about United States military prowess. You know, we have the most weapons, we have the most this, most that. I'm just concerned, like, we would probably win that fight.
We might.
Yeah.
China hasn't lost a war though since the communists took over.
Right.
They won a war with India that no one ever talks about.
Mm-hmm.
They won a war with Vietnam that no one ever talks about. They creamed the United States so bad in North Korea that the United States needed the UN's help.
Wow.
The U.S. beat the North Koreans fair and square, but then the Chinese creamed the Americans fair and square too.
Mm.
And all this, so they've got their military has a fairly good record, whereas our military is coming off all these long-term quagmires.
Right. So the fatigue, basically, we could run into fatigue.
And it's like with Rome and Persia. Both sides are just going to wear each other out, and
Right.
somebody else will be in a position at some point to take over. India is most likely. Back in the 80s, people would have said Japan.
You don't think Russia could do it now?
Russia. So the thing that mainstream media doesn't want you to know is how weak Russia is.
Mm.
Russia has nukes. The only reason the United States is worried about Putin is because Russia has nukes. If Russia did not have nukes, Putin would be as dead as Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi.
Mm.
The only reason he's alive is he has nukes. And that's the thing. That's why Iran is not going to give up its nuclear program.
Right.
Not now. That's why North Korea is not going to give up its nukes. They saw what happened to Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi.
Right.
Russia is able to compete with the United States on a semi-even basis because they have nukes too.
Right.
But their military is in fourth place after the U.S., China, and Israel.
Wow.
No, I'm sorry, fifth place, because number 4 would be the New York Police Department.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that.
I don't remember who told me that. No, I'm sorry. It's not just the New York Police Department. If all the cops in the country were combined,
right,
as one military, that would be number 4 between Israel and Russia.
Jesus. So United States number 1, China's number 2, Israel is number 3,
and then the cops are number 4.
4, and then Russia's 5.
And Russia's number 5.
That's
and if
funny.
you don't count the cops, Russia's number 4.
Right. That's funny. Is that with the nuke or with no nuke?
Well, but that's the thing. With no nukes, they have one aircraft carrier that's left over from the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
All the other Cold War carriers are gone.
Mm-hmm.
Their submarines are all left over from the Cold War.
So they don't. Do you think that do Russia even care about? I'm not pro-military whatsoever, but is that they don't feel the need for having military, or they think nuclear power is more important?
Russia needs enough military to do its thing on its borders. Russia has historically been willing to do business with and help countries on the other side of the world. But for the most part, it didn't try to take over countries on the other side of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Russia sold Alaska to the U.S., remember? That was the American empire of Russia was Alaska. And they sold it to us. They needed the money more.
Right.
And that's worth keeping in mind. They did some colonizing in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
But not anywhere near on the scale of, say, the UK or France.
Mm-hmm.
Not even on the scale of the US.
Right.
The Russians made sure that they had a secure eastern border. They made sure that they had a secure western border. They weren't trying to constantly take over everything.
Mm-hmm.
Stalin, after World War II, his biggest priority was setting up a safe buffer between him and the U.S. Army in West Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we had the Cold War, because the U.S. didn't like it.
Wow.
And trouble with Russia now is the U.S. sticking its nose into places that used to be Russia's business.
Right.
Ukraine used to be part of the Russian Empire and was part of the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. Ukraine has only been an independent country since the Soviet Union fell apart.
Right.
There is no historical Ukrainian state.
Mm.
The earliest Ukrainian independence movement was related to the Nazis during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking about a country with deep roots.
Right.
But there are a lot of people in the Ukraine who have cultural affinities towards Western Europe rather than Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And those people with those cultural affinities have, well, let's say, white supremacist attitudes.
Mm-hmm.
The government that used to run Ukraine before the guy who runs it now got elected was from a party that wasn't afraid of being seen with its Nazi regalia.
Mm-hmm.
The main opposition to Putin, Alexei Navalny, is a guy who sometimes dresses like a Nazi. I referred to Alexei Navalny once as Alexei. Sometimes I like to dress like Hitler, Navalny. And it's just, these are our allies.
Right.
And you have to wonder, if the U.S. loves Nazis so much, what does that say about our government?
No, agreed. Very valid. So the Ukraine, they've been around since when as their own country?
Late 80s, early 90s.
Early 90s? Right.
Union, so.
Right.
And originally they were run by mostly pro-Russian governments.
Mm-hmm.
And then the U.S. helped the Ukrainian nationalists take over.
Mm. Wow. Go America. Look at us doing a great thing around the country, around the world.
Yeah, really. And that's one of the reasons we can't have health care.
Right.
Because we're spending money on that instead. It's not just the official budget either. It's all the corporate money that's going into those parts of the world that could be going into the U.S. instead.
Right. Do you think, what's the worst thing you think that could happen for us to get healthcare in this country? What do you think we'll be giving up? What do you think we'll be losing?
I don't know that we'd be losing anything to get healthcare necessarily. I mean, I think we might have to do something like a general strike in order to get it.
Right.
I don't think it would be easy. I think we would have to really demand it.
No, I agree. That's kind of like where I was going with the question as well. I think we'd probably take that. I think we'd have to give up a lot. The general strike is something I go back to.
People who are willing to get arrested for health care the way that people are willing to get arrested for voting rights.
Right. Right.
It's not a cheerful thought, but I mean, that's what we're looking at. Yeah. And that's the way we need to be thinking about the movement, is
right.
Being willing to get arrested, being willing to risk getting hurt, moving forward despite that risk, knowing that our government may decide to start arresting us or killing us at any moment.
Right.
I mean, again, you look at what the cops did during protests.
Right. Right.
And I think we're getting close to a good wrap up. What are your final thoughts?
No, I think so too. I think it's a good wrap up. If you want to reach me or reach the coalition for March for Medicare for All, our website is all spelled out.org. So that's all.org. We're a growing coalition. We do love when people reach out to us and want to get involved. And if you want to create your own action, you have an action you want to come, you want us to be there. We need to be in community with each other, not just for healthcare, but for anything else. So I do welcome people reaching out to me, even on Twitter too. My Twitter handle is at IAM4M4A. So IAM. Yep, that is me. So IAM4M4A at Twitter. You can find me there and reach out to us and let's be in community together. We definitely need to apply more direct actions. We need more street heat, as I say, when it comes to getting healthcare in this country. So what Chris is talking about, we definitely need more arrestable action. So definitely is important.
No, I definitely agree. I'm going to go ahead and plug my link for those interested.
Mm.
Let me get this back down. This is me. Please subscribe to the YouTube. Please check out the Patreon. All the content is free. The stuff that you can't see is just little messages to people, sometimes in previews of shows before everyone else. Any writing I do and all my videos are up there for free, but this show is what supports my streaming software. So, I mean, if someone can, it helps. I would love to have more patrons. I would love to have more people subscribe to the show here. And I hope everybody has a great night. If nothing else, retweet our stuff.
Absolutely.
And we'll tweet at you. You guys have a great night.
Absolutely. Good night, everybody.